Hi there, in this lesson we are learning how to find out the percentages of an amount. So I'm going to start with the first example, and with that example I'll be showing you how to find out the different percentages. What you need to keep in your mind that these are the questions which I'll be doing now in this lesson are non-calculators. So we'll be doing all the working out without using the calculators. So the first one we are having is, let's say if we have been given an amount which is 220. So the first question we are having is to find out the 10% of 220. To get the 10% of any amount, you divide by 10. So you divide the amount by 10 and you would get the 10% of that amount. So simply the 10% of 220 is £22. Now, if I have to find out the 20% of 220, so I'm showing you now how to find out 20% of this 220. So you have got the 10%. When you double the 10%, you would get the 20%. So simply whatever you're going to get is you multiply it by 2 to get the 20%, and that would be £44. They could ask to find out the 30% of the amount 220. Now to find out the 30% of this amount 220, you go back to the 10% and this time you're going to multiply the amount by 3. So when you multiply 22 by 3, you'll get £66. Now we're going to look more of this amount. Now we're going to look more of this amount 220. So let's say if we have been asked to find out 50% of 220. So we know that 50% is a half. To get 50% of any amount, you divide by 2. So the 50% of 220 would be the half of it, which would be £110. It could be possibly asked to find out the 5% of 220. So to find out the 5% of 220, you can go back on the 10% of 220. So from previous, we know that the 10% of 220 is £22. Getting 5% from 10% would be dividing by 2, because we know that the half of the 10% is the 5%. So getting 5% of 220 means doing the half of the 10%, and the half of £22 would be £11. Even we can find out 1% of 220 as well. So the 1% of 220 would be, again going back onto the 10%. So we know that the 10% is £22. So 1% would be further dividing this by 10. So it would be now, or you can say that getting 1% of any amount, you divide it by 100. So when you divide it by 100, you'll get 1% of 220 would be 2.2. So I've showed you how to find out the 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%, 10%, 5% and 1% of the amount 220. Now we're going to look to some examples where we have to find out the different percentages of an amount. In this example, we are finding out what is the 15% of 140. So we know that if I'm going to split this 15% is a combination of a 10% and a 5%. Now I'm going to find out that if I add them together, that would give us 15%. That's what we are looking for. Now I'm going to find out what's the 10% of 140. So as I said that to find out the 10% of any amount, you divide it by 10. So the 10% of 140 is £14. To get 5% of 140, the half of the 10% would be the 5%. So the half of 14 would be 7. And because we are finding out the 15%, so we add these two numbers together and the total would be 14 plus 7 would be £21 is the 15% of 140. Let's have a look to the next example. So in the next example, they asked to work out 35% of 540. I'm going to split this 35% into maybe into 30% and 5%. So if I add 30% and the 5% together, I would get 35%. So we can't find out 30% straight, but what we can do is easily we can look for the 10%. So on the side, I'm going to write down 10% of 540 would be 54. If 10% of 540 is 54, then we're going to check that what's 30% of that. So 30% of that would be you multiply it by 3 and you multiply this by 3 as well. So to find out this, you're going to do 10 times 3 would be 30. So here we're having 30% of 540 would be when you multiply 54 by 3. As I said that this is a non-calculator, so on the side I'm going to show you the multiplication. 3 times 4 is a 12. Then 3 times 5 is a 15 plus 1 would be 16. So it would be 162. I'm going to write this down over here as 30% represents 162. 5% is the half of the 10%. So now how much is the 5% is? So 5% of 540 would be half of 54. So how do we find out the half of 54? Again, I'm showing on the side 54 divided by 2. So how many 2 makes 5 would be 2 with the remainder of 1. Now it's 14. So how many 2 makes 14 would be 7. So the half of 54 is 27. I'm going to now write it down here. So the 30% is 162. 5% is 27. You'll be getting both the numbers over here. And because we are finding out the 35% of it, so it means we add 162 with 27. So adding these two numbers together, 2 plus 7 is a 9, 6 plus 2 is 8, and there's a 1 here. So it would be 189. Simply we got the final answer, which is the 35% of 540 would be 189. I'm going to circle it here. Now we're going to look to the next example. So in the next example, they're asking for 5% of 600. To get 5% of 600, it's very simple. First, we're going to look for the 10% of 600. So the 10% of 600 would be just dividing the number by 10. So that would be 60. And because we are finding out the 5% of 600, it means we'll be dividing it by 2. So whatever the 10% you divided by 2 to get the 5%. So half of 60 is 30. So I can write down the final answer here that 5% of 600 would be 30. Let's have a go on the next example. So now we are finding out the 75% of 80 pounds. To get 75%, I can split the 75% into the 50% and 25%. First, we're going to find out how much is the 50%. So I'm doing it on the side. The 50% of 80 is the half of 80. So we're going to divide 80 by 2 and the half of 80 would be 40 pounds. Then we're going to see that how much is 25%. So we know that when we do the further half of 50, that would be 25. So 25% of 80 would be when you divide this 40 by 2 again, and that would be 20. So we know now how much is the 50%, which is 40. We know now how much is the 25%, which is 20. We add them together and that would be 60. So we can write down the final answer here that 75% of 80 pounds would be 60 pounds. Now, here's our last example to find out 26% of 70 pounds. So how do we find out this 26% is? We can find out 25% of the 70 pounds. And then we find out the 1% of the 70 pounds and we add them together. So this 26%, we are splitting in the 25% and 1%. To get 25%, first we're going to find out how much is the 50% of it. So I'm going to write down 50% of 70 pounds would be the half of 70 pounds, which would be 35. Because we are looking for 25%, it means we're going to do more half of it. So 25% of 70 would be the half of 35, which would be 17.5. So we got the 25%, which is 17.5 pounds. But looking to the 1%, so to find out how much is the 1% of 70 pounds would be, you divide 70 pounds by 100. So I'm going to write it down over here. So 1% of any number is to divide by 100. And when you do 70 divided by 100, you'll get 0.7. So the 1% of £70 is 0.7. Now, because we are looking all together for 26%, so we're going to add them together. So 26% is basically 25% plus 1%. From previous, we know that the 25% is 7.5 and 1% is 0.7. When you add them together, so now when you'll get 17.5 plus 0.7, you'll come out with 18.2. So the sum of them is 18.2, which means that 26% of 70 would be 18.2 pounds. I hope this video you have found useful in finding out the percentages of an amount without using the calculator. And if you liked the video and found it helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much.